Hello, my name is Maddie, and my sister emptied my savings account to buy luxury handbags and jewelry. And when I confronted my parents, they told me she was in a tough spot. But that was just the beginning. They used my name to open credit lines. They sold my grandmother's necklace. They even created a fake fundraiser, painting me as the villain while they collected donations behind my back. For years, I believed being the good daughter meant staying quiet. But what happens when silence costs you your identity, your future, your name? How far would your own family go before you finally say, enough? The first red flag was a silence, the kind that crept in just before something awful made itself known. I was sitting in the waiting room of Atlantic Bank, sipping watered-down coffee and mentally rehearsing my mortgage pitch. Everything was supposed to line up. 10 years at the firm, 800-plus credit score, no debt, and a modest but solid down payment I'd scraped together over years of cutting corners. No vacations, no splurges, just discipline and spreadsheets. I pulled up my banking app to double-check my savings balance, more out of habit than worry. The screen loaded, $76.43. I stared, refreshed, blinked again. A second later, a notification popped up. Transaction approved, Dior, $7,200. No, that wasn't possible. That account wasn't just mine, it was sacred. The family emergency fund I'd set up years ago, with my own routing numbers and my own discipline. Only 3 people had access to it: me, my mother Elaine, and Delaney. I felt the blood drain from my face. The banker called my name. I walked into the meeting like a robot, clutching my tote bag like it might anchor me to something stable. She smiled. "Let's get started. I've reviewed your pre-approval file, and I'm afraid there's a problem." My ears rang. "Excuse me? Your credit score's dropped over 100 points in the last 30 days. There are multiple overdrafts and a new installment plan. Looks like retail, under your name. Did you open an account at Eclat Lux recently?" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I just nodded like I'd been hit by a car and was too dazed to feel the pain yet. When I finally made it out to the parking lot, the air was cold, but I was burning. I dialed Delaney, hands trembling. She didn't pick up, so I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't even text ahead. The front door was open. Delaney was lounging on the porch swing, snapping selfies with a brand new designer bag resting beside her like a trophy. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. "Hey, sis," she said, blowing a kiss toward her phone screen. "You drained the emergency account," I said, voice low. "The one I built, for family." Delaney shrugged. "It was a self-esteem emergency. You know how hard things have been for me." I stepped forward, fists clenched. "That wasn't your money." Elaine appeared in the doorway, arms crossed in that way she always did when she was ready to downplay a crisis. "She's been going through a rough time, Maddie. She needed a boost, and you always land on your feet." "I just got denied for a mortgage," I snapped, "because of Delaney's shopping spree and whatever other mess she's pulled in my name." Elaine sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. "She's your sister, and I'm not your ATM." Victor was parked in the recliner behind her, sipping a beer and pretending not to hear a word. Delaney stood, flipping her hair. "God, you're so dramatic. It's not like I bought a car or something. I just needed to feel normal again. Everyone expects me to look the part." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that felt foreign in my own throat. "Normal? You think this is normal?" Elaine stepped in again, her tone like ice wrapped in honey. "Maddie, you're overreacting. She's in a tough spot. Try a little compassion." "Tough spot?" I repeated. "You mean jobless by choice? Maxed out on 5 credit cards? Dropped out of 2 colleges?" Delaney's lips curled. "At least I'm not boring. Maybe if you weren't so uptight, people would actually like you." That hit harder than I expected. Not because it was true, but because it was rehearsed. Like she'd been waiting to say it for years. I didn't respond. Just turned and walked out, keys digging into my palm. Back home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even sit down. I opened my laptop, pulled up every transaction in the last 12 months, and started building a case. Every overdraft, every unauthorized charge, every mistake. By midnight, I had color-coded tabs and a spreadsheet that could make a CPA weep. At the top of it, I wrote one line on a sticky note and slapped it to my monitor. This time, I fix it by ending it. I wasn't just going to fix this. I was going to expose it. I didn't sleep much after the spreadsheet. I spent most of the night staring at the numbers, columns of theft dressed up as entitlement. But it wasn't the money that kept me awake. It was the way Delaney looked at me, like I was the villain in her story. Like I was holding her back from her God-given right to a luxury lifestyle I'd worked 10 years to afford and still hadn't touched. The next morning, I took a long shower, dressed in a gray sweater and jeans, and drove to my parents' house again. Not to argue. I wasn't looking for apologies or explanations. I wanted one thing, something I hadn't even thought about in years, but suddenly felt like the last piece of myself that hadn't been tainted. Grandma's necklace. It was a delicate gold chain with a tiny emerald leaf, something she wore every Sunday without fail. When she passed, Mom kept it in her jewelry box for safekeeping. She always said it would go to me one day. When I walked in, Elaine was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter like she hadn't just watched her daughter's credit implode the week before. Victor was in the den, flipping through channels with the volume on mute. "I just came for the necklace," I said, skipping the pleasantries. Elaine turned slowly. "What necklace?" "Grandma's. The emerald one she left for me." She stiffened. "Oh, that." A beat passed, then another. "We don't have it anymore," she said finally. I blinked. "What?" "We had to sell it. Delaney. She was in a really bad place, emotionally. She needed help." Victor chimed in from the other room without looking up. "It's just jewelry. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I felt something inside me snap, not like a branch breaking, but like a root being ripped out from the dirt. That necklace wasn't just a trinket. It was the only thing in this entire house that was mine without debate. No shared account, no justification, just mine. And now it was gone too. "Do you hear yourselves?" I said. "You sold something that wasn't yours." Again. Elaine crossed her arms. "We didn't think you'd notice. You never even asked about it." I laughed under my breath. "Because I trusted you." She softened her tone. "Honey, you make more money than all of us combined. We figured—" "No," I interrupted. "You decided. Again." She tilted her head. "You don't understand how hard it is for Delaney. She needs support." "And what am I?" I asked. "A donor? A backup plan?" Elaine's voice sharpened. "Family means sharing everything." "No," I said, eyes locked on hers. "Family means respecting boundaries. That necklace? That wasn't yours to give away." Victor muted the TV. "Jesus, Maddie, always so dramatic. You act like we pawned a kidney." I turned to leave. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been twisted into guilt. As I walked to the door, I caught a glimpse of the empty jewelry box on the dresser. I remembered the day Grandma gave it to Mom, told her to pass it to me when I was ready. I guess she meant when I was naive enough to think they'd honor her wishes. Back in my car, I didn't drive right away. I just sat there. The air was cold inside, but my chest burned like I'd swallowed a hot coal. I opened my phone, pulled up the Notes app, and typed a new title. What They've Taken. I started listing, not dollars, not possessions, time, peace, promises, respect, that necklace. The list was longer than I expected, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for making that list. The next morning, I woke up with a strange calm settling over me, a quiet certainty that something bigger had been happening all along. The necklace, the money, the fake job references, they weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a system, one my family had built around me without ever asking permission. I poured myself a black coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. If there was one thing I trusted more than my instincts, it was my documentation habits. I'd kept almost every financial file since I was 20. It didn't take long to find something suspicious. A loan from 2019. Best Buy. A $1,399 purchase under my name. The item? A 70-inch Samsung Smart TV. I never bought that. I didn't even have cable that year. The guarantor field listed my name. But when I downloaded the contract, my signature looked off. Like someone had traced it from a scanned document and stretched it into a poor imitation. Then I saw the contact email on the form. VictorMaddieSupportAL.com. My father's name. My name. Mashed into a grotesque little lie. I sat back, heart pounding, not from shock, but from clarity. He told me back then it was a glitch. I'd asked about a credit dip, and he shrugged it off like a slow Wi-Fi connection. Probably some bank error, he'd said. Don't worry, these things sort themselves out. I believed him. Because back then, I still wanted to. I clicked open the file I'd started in the car, now saved to my desktop. What they've taken. I added a new line in bold. March 2019. Best Buy loan, $1,399. Forged signature. Then I changed the title. What I'm taking back. Later that afternoon, I met Aunt Rachel at a local cafe. She was my mother's younger sister, the only relative who hadn't blindly sided with Delaney in every argument we'd ever had. She hugged me tightly when I arrived. You look exhausted. I am. Over cappuccinos, we chatted small talk. Weather, work, nothing too deep. But after a pause, she leaned forward and lowered her voice. Maddie, I didn't want to say anything, but your mom's been telling people you offered to support Delaney until she got on her feet. I stopped mid-sip. Excuse me? She's been saying it for years. That you agreed to help Delaney out because you felt guilty for having more. That you promised to take care of her. I stared at her. I never said that. Ever. Rachel looked down. I know. But that's what they've been telling everyone. That it was your idea. That they didn't force you into anything. I couldn't even respond at first. It was like I'd stepped into someone else's memoir. One where I played the generous benefactor, not the exploited scapegoat. They used your name like a discount card, Rachel whispered. It was convenient. I swallowed hard, nodded slowly, and stood to leave. Thank you for telling me. That means more than you know. Back at home, I pulled out a dusty banker's box from the hall closet. It held old tax returns, lease agreements, credit reports. I started flipping through one by one. Another loan. A JCPenney credit card from 2016. A used car application from 2015. A payday loan from 2020 under an address I hadn't lived at since college. All in my name. All unauthorized. This wasn't recklessness. It was a system. A pattern of fraud hidden under a family crest. By the time I closed the last folder, my hands were steady. They hadn't just taken from me. They'd structured their survival around the assumption that I would never notice. Or if I did, I wouldn't fight back. They were wrong. They've spent years perfecting this pattern, and I just became its final break. By the end of that weekend, my wall was papered with evidence, printouts, loan agreements, scanned copies of forged documents. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them keep doing this. Monday morning brought a different kind of surprise. I opened my mailbox on the way out for work, expecting junk coupons or bills. Instead, there it was. A government envelope from the IRS. Urgent. Response required. I opened it right there in the hallway. Notification of benefit review. The letter claimed I had received unemployment assistance for 3 months the previous year. Except I hadn't. I'd worked the entire year. I even had a certificate from HR for perfect attendance. At first, I thought it was a phishing scam, until I saw my social security number, my full legal name, and an address I hadn't lived at in over a decade. My parents' home. The bank account listed for deposit? Not mine. But the last 4 digits looked eerily familiar. Delaney's checking account. I froze. Cars passed outside. A dog barked from across the lot. But in my head, everything went still. This wasn't family theft anymore. This was federal fraud. At my desk that afternoon, I tried calling the IRS helpline. Between hold music and robotic prompts, I filed a dispute, but I knew it would take months to resolve. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, my phone rang. It was the bank. Maddie Price? We're calling about a flagged account listed under your name as cosigner, an $18,000 loan issued last spring. I blinked. What loan? For a boat repair. The borrower listed was Victor Price. My father. The loan had defaulted last month. Now, the collections department was preparing to pursue cosigners, me, for repayment. I felt the blood drain from my face. Ma'am, the agent said, we're also obligated to inform you that due to your employment in financial services, this account has triggered an alert on your professional credit monitoring. And just like that, my workplace was notified. By 3 p.m., Dex, my supervisor, called me into his office. He didn't yell, didn't accuse, but the look on his face, tight lips, furrowed brow, was worse. Maddie, your credit flag came through compliance review. I know, I said quietly. If this is identity theft, I need you to report it officially. Otherwise, it becomes a reputational risk for both of us. He didn't say the word termination. He didn't have to. That night, after pacing my apartment for an hour and talking myself out of crying for the 10th time, I drove to the Charlotte police station. I filed my first formal report for identity theft. Detective Arden was assigned to my case. A tall woman with salt and pepper hair, no-nonsense posture, and a surprisingly gentle voice. You'd be shocked how many cases like yours involve family, she said as I laid out my folder of documentation. But most people don't keep records this clean. I handed her the IRS letter and the boat loan details. She scanned through them, eyes narrowing. This qualifies as felony fraud on both counts, she confirmed. They used your identity to obtain government funds, and co-signing without your consent. That's bank fraud. I sat there, hands folded in my lap. I wasn't shaking anymore, just cold, numb. I always thought if I kept my head down, worked hard, saved money, I'd be okay, I said. Arden nodded slowly. People like your father and sister don't target strangers. They go after the ones least likely to report them. I looked up. That changes tonight. She slid a card across the table. Keep documenting. We'll escalate as this develops. As I left the station, I felt something unfamiliar swelling in my chest. Not fear, not rage, resolve. And this time, when they ask me to stay silent, I'll bring a detective with me. By the next week, I had a manila folder labeled Active Fraud. Not just printed documents anymore, USB backups, recorded calls, my police report file number. Detective Arden told me to keep everything documented, organized, ready for court if needed. I didn't expect the next piece to arrive through my work email. Hey, heads up, Dex had written. Got a weird reference check call this morning for you, but it wasn't you. I was mid-coffee sip when I froze. I walked straight to his office, and he handed me a resume printout. My name, my school, my credentials, but not my voice. The firm she'd applied to? One of our competitors in downtown Charlotte. A high-level client advisor position. The same promotion I had been eyeing internally. Whoever that was, Dex said, they listed all the key accounts you handled here. But the timeline's off. They claimed joint experience with another rep we've never heard of. He looked at me carefully. HR wants to pause your promotion review until we figure this out. The paper crinkled in my hand. I didn't need to guess. I knew that handwriting, that phrasing. Delaney had used my identity, again, to fake her way into a career. I took a breath. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was done reacting. That night, I followed the number listed under her professional references. Burner phone. Traced back to a prepaid plan purchased 2 days prior at a Walgreens near my parents' neighborhood. She hadn't just lied. She'd built a web of forgery. I forwarded everything, resume, fake reference details, Dex's internal memo, to Arden. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Arden, This qualifies as criminal impersonation with intent to defraud, plus impersonation for hire. I sat with that for a moment. It wasn't just identity theft anymore. She was actively trying to replace me. I didn't even think twice before grabbing my keys. The drive to my parents' house was automatic by now. I knew the route blindfolded. But this wasn't a visit. This was the line. Elaine opened the door with a sigh. "Maddie, can we not do this again? We're tired of the accusations." "I'm not here to talk," I said. "I'm here to document." She scoffed, crossing her arms. "Oh, for heaven's sake." Delaney came downstairs in one of her faux designer blazers. "You just love playing the victim. Maybe if you had a personality, you'd get a job offer too." I handed her the envelope. Sealed, labeled, evidence. "That's the resume you submitted to Bowen Financial," I said. "That's the fake reference number. And that," I pointed to the page with her photo, "is the final time you'll ever use my name for anything." She rolled her eyes. "You're being so dramatic." Victor, lounging in his usual recliner, didn't even look up from his phone. "You wouldn't actually put your sister in jail." I turned to him, my voice cold and steady. "Try me." Nobody moved. Even the dog seemed to sense the shift in the air. "I already filed a police report," I continued. "The next time this happens, I won't give a warning. You'll hear about it from the DA's office." Delaney's expression flickered. Just for a second. That was all I needed. I walked out before they could throw another excuse at me. Back home, I added a new page to the digital folder I'd created for Arden. Entry 3/28/24. Subject impersonated me professionally. Evidence provided. Verbal cease issued. Family confirmed defiant. I wasn't doing this to scare them anymore. I was building a record, a timeline, a wall they couldn't climb. They didn't believe me when I said this was their last warning. They will. The next morning started with stale coffee and a dull headache that felt earned. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by crumpled tax forms and half-finished folders. My inbox pinged every few minutes, none of it urgent, all of it exhausting. Then my phone lit up. "Romy." I didn't even say hello. "Hey," she said, voice breathless, like she'd run across the street or maybe up a flight of stairs. "You need to come here, now." She didn't explain. I didn't ask. Her tone said everything. 15 minutes later, I was walking into her office building, still wearing yesterday's sweater and the same jeans I'd cried in the night before. Romy was waiting near the front desk with a manila envelope in her hands and a face like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't sit. I didn't need to. "I was helping a walk-in with a title issue," she began. "It was Delaney." "Of course it was." "I noticed your name, on the cosigner line." My heart didn't sink. It turned to stone. I blinked. "You're kidding." She handed me the envelope. Inside were printed documents, neatly clipped, legal language, DMV forms, notarized signatures. Mine, or what was supposed to be mine. My name sat beneath the vehicle registration like a forged blessing. The signature was close, but not close enough. The kind of fake you could get away with if no one looked too hard. But Romy had looked. "She filed this last week," Romy said. "And there's more." She pulled out another paper and laid it flat on her desk. "Home equity line. Your name again. This one's tied to your parents' house." My mouth went dry. "You're serious?" She nodded grimly. "It's official. They waited until after your warning. You told them you'd report any more fraud. And they did this anyway. In writing." I sank into the nearest chair. "They didn't just ignore me," I said softly. "They tested me." "They're gambling you won't follow through," Romy replied. "They're betting on the same silence you've always given them. But they forgot something." "What's that?" "You're not that girl anymore." We spent the next hour cross-referencing the documents, matching VIN numbers, dates, addresses, bank info. Romy, being a licensed notary, had access to verification tools that made the job easier and colder. "Same handwriting across both forms," she pointed out. "Your signature? Nowhere close. And look, Delaney spelled your middle name wrong on the home equity line. Sloppy, arrogant, lazy, but deliberate. They're not just stealing from me, I whispered. They're building their survival on my silence. Romy didn't argue. She just reached for her phone and started photographing everything. Come on, she said, grabbing her car keys. You're not fighting this alone. By mid-afternoon, we were sitting in a quiet interview room at the Charlotte police station. The walls were beige. The lights were sterile. But I felt oddly calm. Detective Arden joined us 5 minutes later. She'd seen me before, when I first filed the identity theft report, but this time she brought a legal pad and a different expression. Sharper. Like someone preparing for trial. I laid out the folder on the desk, every page labeled, every detail logged, vehicle registration with the forged cosigner, home equity forms with my falsified guarantor consent, Romy's notarized witness statement. Arden flipped through them slowly, then tapped her pen twice on the table. This isn't a civil dispute anymore, she said. This is multiple felonies, cosigner fraud, false declaration on financial instruments, identity misuse across state records. I nodded once. I want to press charges. Arden raised an eyebrow. No more warnings? I met her gaze. Not this time. She nodded, made a note, and slid a case intake form toward me. Then let's get started. That night, I sat on my couch with a container of Thai food I barely touched and a bottle of red wine that tasted like dust. I'd told Romy not to fuss, but she showed up anyway, just like always. After we'd settled into the quiet, she pulled out her phone. I wasn't going to tell you until later, she said, but you need to hear this. She hit play. A voicemail recording crackled to life. Delaney's voice filled the room, light and smug. Don't stress. Worst case, Maddie bails me out again. That's what big sisters do, right? The sound of her laugh made something deep in me recoil. She left that after filing the car loan, Romy said, watching me closely. Thought we wouldn't notice. Thought you wouldn't. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then took a long, slow sip of wine. I hope the court hears it too. Romy raised her glass. To war, then. I didn't clink glasses, didn't smile. I opened my laptop and created a new folder on my desktop. Court prep. Inside it, I dragged every document I had. Every screenshot, every photo, every record of every lie. They had used my trust, my credit, my history. Now I'd use the law. They thought I was weak because I stayed silent. They forgot something. I wasn't quiet because I was scared. I was quiet because I was calculating. Now, I'm not calculating anymore. I'm coming. And I hope they packed light, because I'm not just bringing paperwork. I'm bringing fire. And I'm bringing the law. The next morning unfolded in the usual way. Quiet, slow, and deceptively ordinary. I was still in sweatpants, hair tied back in a careless bun, sipping lukewarm coffee, and scrolling through unread emails when my phone buzzed with a text from Jen. Jen Harper, my old roommate from college. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since she moved to Seattle. Her message was short. Is this really you? Below it was a single link. Curious, confused, maybe even a little worried, I clicked. The page loaded slowly, like it knew it carried something heavy. GoFundMe. Help us save our family. Victim of legal misunderstanding. My breath caught before I even saw the rest. There, front and center, was my face. My name in bold type. A collage of cherry-picked childhood photos filled the space below. Me and Delaney building sandcastles at Myrtle Beach, wrapped in matching scarves by the Christmas tree, hugging on my 6th birthday while I blew out candles. It might have been sweet, nostalgic even, if it weren't smeared across a digital smear campaign. Beneath the photos was a caption that made my chest tighten. Our daughter is suing us over a simple mistake. We're about to lose our home. Please help us survive this cruel betrayal. Family is everything, and ours is being torn apart by legal threats and bitterness. Anything helps. 20,000 shares, nearly $9,000 raised. And the comments, I scrolled, my stomach twisting with every line. Who takes their parents to court over money? Ungrateful brat. Must have been spoiled her whole life. This generation is disgusting. Heartless witch. Imagine doing this to your own blood. I sat down on the edge of the bed as my phone slipped from my fingers. My hands trembled. Not from fear, but something colder. Shame, maybe. Humiliation. The kind that doesn't come from strangers, but from betrayal, served with a smile. My own family had taken every memory we'd ever shared and turned it into ammunition. They hadn't just stolen money. They'd stolen the story of my life. Ping. Another message. Delaney this time. I haven't slept in days. I can't breathe. I might do something stupid and it'll be your fault. Before I could even process that, another one followed. You win, okay? Just take your stupid pride and go. I'm done. And then one more. This time from Mom. Do you even care what this is doing to your father? His blood pressure is through the roof. He could die, Maddie. Think about that before you run to your police friends again. There it was again. Not remorse. Not an apology, just pressure. Emotional manipulation dressed in faux concern. The same playbook they'd used all my life. Guilt disguised as love. Control masquerading as concern. I took a breath. My hands steadied. Then I took screenshots. Every word. Every veiled threat. Every gaslighting tactic they'd honed to perfection. I picked up my phone and called Detective Arden. She didn't ask for an explanation. She just said, "Come in." At the station, I sat across from her once again. The fluorescent lights were still too bright. The room still too cold. But this time, I didn't feel small. I showed her the GoFundMe page, the caption, the childhood photos, the manipulated narrative, the texts from my family. Arden's expression darkened. Her hands folded calmly over the file, but her voice was razor sharp. This isn't just family drama anymore. This is public defamation and digital fraud. She stood, grabbed her tablet, and began drafting a memo on the spot. We're forwarding this to the DA's office. I'll request an emergency injunction to freeze the funds before they vanish into another luxury handbag. I nodded. Before I left the station, I sent the fundraiser link and all related screenshots to my company's legal department. I'd learned my lesson after the last time. I wouldn't let another lie trickle into my professional life unnoticed. By sundown, the GoFundMe page was suspended, pending investigation. But the damage had already been done. My inbox was full. Not from work, but from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some were kind. Hey, I don't know what's happening, but I hope you're okay. Let me know if you need anything. But most were laced in doubt. Your mom looked really upset in that photo. Is any of it true? This doesn't sound like you. Are you sure you're not overreacting? You've changed. They weren't trying to hurt me, but it still stung. Because when you spend your life being the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who never causes problems, people struggle to believe you when you finally stand up and say, enough. That night, Romy came over with her laptop and a look of focused fury. We need to respond, she said, sitting beside me at the kitchen table. Not emotionally, legally. We didn't write a paragraph. We didn't tell our side of the story. We didn't defend ourselves to strangers who had already decided I was the villain. We posted one line on my public profile. The truth doesn't need a campaign. It needs documentation, and I have it. Then we filed a copyright claim on every photo they'd used without my permission. Within an hour, the fundraiser's collage vanished. But the comments, the damage, floated around like smoke after a fire. I didn't reply to a single one. I didn't owe them my pain. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I was done trying to win anyone's approval. This wasn't a PR crisis. It was justice in progress. They thought I'd cower, that I'd crumble under public pressure. But they forgot one thing. I kept receipts. And I was ready to testify. The next voicemail came as the sun broke through my blinds, casting slivers of light across my kitchen table, still cluttered with legal pads and takeout containers. My phone buzzed angrily against the wood. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew the voice before she even said my name. "You should be ashamed of yourself," Elaine hissed, her breathing shallow, theatrical. "Your father collapsed last night. The doctors say it's stress. His blood pressure is through the roof. Are you happy now?" No greeting, no context, no update on whether he was even stable. Just a guilt missile, launched with precision and maternal venom. Not 5 minutes later, another message came in. This time, a text from Delaney. "If Dad dies, it's on you. Not we're scared. Not he's stable now. Just weaponized blame." I didn't reply. I grabbed my keys, not out of worry, not out of concern, but because I needed confirmation. I needed truth. And at this point, I trusted hospital monitors more than I trusted my family. At the hospital, I gave my name at the front desk, bracing myself for whatever theater they had prepared. "Room 312, the nurse said with a sympathetic tilt of her head. I walked in quietly. Victor was lying in the bed, IV in his arm, monitors humming. His eyes were closed. He didn't stir when I entered. Elaine was seated in the corner, arms crossed tightly, posture rigid. Not like a worried wife. Like a woman preparing for war. She looked up when she saw me and rolled her eyes. "What now?" she snapped. "Here to serve a subpoena at his bedside?" I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen, the red circle of the recording app glowing like a boundary. "No," I said evenly. "I came to ask one thing." Her expression hardened. "Oh, please." "Did you forge my signature again?" Her jaw clenched. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Finally, she gave a bitter little laugh. "You always had to make everything harder," she said. "You always had to be the good one." "I never asked for that," I replied. "I just stopped letting you take things." Victor didn't move. Not a word. Not a twitch. Maybe he was asleep. Maybe he was pretending. Maybe he'd been playing that game my whole life. I didn't stay. I turned and walked out, the beep of the monitor following me like a metronome of everything they'd taken. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone rang again. Detective Arden. His voice was clipped, direct. "Brace yourself," he said. "Delaney and your father just filed a power of attorney in your name. Backdated. Notarized by someone who left the state 2 days ago." My throat dried. "What for?" "They're trying to reroute the court summons and refinance the house under your name, your legal authority." "They forged it again?" My voice was ice. "Sloppily. We caught it early, but this is no longer petty theft. It's felony fraud, across multiple jurisdictions." I didn't hesitate. I didn't cry. "I already have the appointment set," I said. 2 mornings later, I stood on the cold granite steps of the Mecklenburg County Courthouse. My arms were full. Binders, folders, printed screenshots, notarized statements. My attorney, Ms. Lynn, was already ahead of me, dressed in calm black. Detective Arden walked beside me like a human shield. Inside the courtroom, it was colder than I expected. Not temperature-wise, something deeper. A stillness made heavier by history. Across the room sat my parents and Delaney. Elaine wore a blazer-like armor, lips pressed into a line of martyrdom. Delaney had tears in her eyes, crocodile and convenient. Victor looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, slouched as though gravity had finally noticed him. I didn't look away. Ms. Lynn presented our case like slicing silk, clean and exact. Bank statements, loan documents, fake emails, forged signatures, screenshots of Delaney's GoFundMe, edited photos, and comments weaponized against me. The resume she'd submitted in my name. The voice messages, the fraud reports, the notarized power of attorney filed behind my back. Their attorney gave a weak smile and tried the family angle. "A misunderstanding," he said. "A misstep, not malicious." "A plea for help," he called it, misread as betrayal. Ms. Lynn didn't blink. "This is not a family squabble," she said. "This is coordinated identity theft. This is wire fraud, financial coercion, and impersonation with intent to defraud." The judge, A man in his 60s with a face like weathered stone turned to me. "Ms. Carson," he said, "would you like to make a statement?" I stood. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. "Yes, Your Honor." I looked at the bench, at my family, at the courtroom that would become the turning point in a decade-long cycle. They say family means unconditional love, but when love comes with conditions, like silence, like submission, like sacrifice, it stops being love. It becomes leverage. I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here because this is where survival has brought me. I'm here to reclaim my name, the one they used like a currency, the one they sold and signed without asking, the one they tried to bury under excuses and sob stories. I paused. They didn't just steal money, they stole time, peace, reputation, and they expected me to stay quiet because I share their blood. I'm done being quiet. The room was still. Delaney looked at the floor. Elaine blinked slowly, but said nothing. Victor didn't move. The judge nodded, jotted something down. I didn't wait for the verdict. I walked out of that courtroom not with triumph, but with clarity. Because that day, I didn't win a case. I took back my name. And for the first time in years, it felt like it belonged to me again. The courthouse steps felt warmer than they should have for early May. I sat in my car, windows cracked, holding the official copy of the verdict. Delaney. Guilty of multiple counts: fraud, identity theft, falsifying legal documents. Victor and Elaine. Suspended sentences, full restitution ordered. All fraudulent accounts in my name? Closed. Reversed. Cleared. No cheering, no confetti. Just the slow, sacred satisfaction of a name restored. Inside the courtroom, Delaney had cried as the verdict was read, her face in her hands. Elaine didn't react, didn't look at anyone. Victor kept glancing down, like the floor had answers he couldn't find in himself. I didn't watch them leave. I walked out with my attorney, nodded once to Detective Arden, and exhaled. There was no room left in my body for pity, only peace. 2 weeks later, I stood inside my new condo. Sunlight pooling through the big window, paint still smelling fresh. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. Bought with clean credit, earned without guilt. Romy stopped by with a bottle of sparkling cider. Arden dropped off a card, handwritten, with his badge number on the back and 2 words beneath it. "Call any time." I laughed. For the first time in months, I laughed without bitterness. That night, I received an email from a local women's center. Someone from my office had referred me. "Would you be willing to speak on financial abuse? We're hosting a seminar next month. We'd love your perspective." At first, I almost declined. Then I wrote back, "Only if I can tell the truth. Every ugly part, every strong part." Weeks later, I stepped onto a small stage, not much bigger than a yoga mat, and looked out at a sea of faces, mostly women. Some nodded before I even opened my mouth, as if they'd already lived the first half of my story. I cleared my throat. My sister emptied my savings to buy luxury goods. My parents said she was in a tough spot, so I stopped being their safety net and became my own protector. No one clapped. They didn't need to. Their silence was sacred. Afterward, a woman in her 60s approached me with watery eyes. "You put into words something I never could. Thank you." That meant more than any verdict ever could. One morning, a letter came. No return address. The handwriting unmistakable. Elaine. "We lost a daughter while trying to save another. If you ever want to talk, you know where we are." I read it once, folded it neatly, slipped it into the back of my nightstand drawer. Not in the trash, not on the mantel, just out of the way. That chapter is closed, but I'm still the one holding the pen. They wanted me to carry their chaos. I built something solid instead, and I sleep just fine. Sometimes the hardest decisions aren't about choosing between right and wrong. They're about choosing yourself after years of being told not to. I used to think being the responsible one meant carrying everyone else's burden. I thought loyalty meant silence. I thought love meant sacrifice, even if it hurt me. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. Boundaries don't make you cruel. Speaking up doesn't make you broken. And walking away doesn't mean you've given up on family. It means you're finally showing up for yourself. If you've ever been made to feel guilty for choosing your peace, let me be the one to say this. You're not wrong. You're allowed to protect your name, your future, and your freedom. I'm not the same woman who stayed quiet while they emptied my accounts and rewrote my story. I'm the woman who took it back. And I sleep just fine. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to someone you love just to protect yourself? Do you believe family should have limits? Or is loyalty unconditional, no matter the cost? Let me know in the comments. Drop A if this story spoke to you, or just tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if this story moved you, helped you reflect, or gave you strength, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. We share real stories here, raw ones, because someone out there needs to hear it. Thanks for watching. You're not alone.